With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos DAF Kuf. We're going to have more applications of the concept of by Hoitzah, that Bo'im Ka'achas, as we started the Moededik Sugya yesterday, the boyas of Rabbi Yochanan. We're going to bring in the machlokes between Almeir and the Chachamim that we have in Masechtas Eruvin regarding mezuzah. The words are choykikin lahashlim or not, whether we carve out to complete or not. We're speaking about the chiyuv of a mezuzah. Many people think it's on a house. It's not exactly on a house. The chiyuv of a mezuzah is in a doorway, and there are definitions of that doorway. It has to be at least 4 tefachim wide. It has to be at least 10 tefachim tall. If there is a doorway that has the height 10 tefachim tall, but it doesn't have 4 tefachim all the way to the top, in the bottom of the doorway, you have the 4 tefachim. When you go up, it's like it arches in, but the wall, if you were to carve out, there is place in the wall to carve out the 4 tefachim wide doorway. Rav Meir says that choykikin lahashlim, yechayev v'mezuzah. Chachamim say you don't do choykikin lahashlim. We'll see how this applies. Very similarly to laws regarding Hoitzah. We're going to be speaking about the law of a mound. In other words, the way you make a Reshus HaYachid into a Reshus HaYachid, as we have been learning, by Shabbos, Reshus HaYachid doesn't mean it belongs to someone individually. It's not private property at all. For Kinyanim, it's that way. Right? Chatzar Koina, it has to be mine. It has to be a Reshus HaYachid. And Mavakama, we're going to have a whole different way of understanding Reshus HaYachid. The Hilchas Shabbos for Hoitzah, Reshus HaYachid can belong to everyone. It can be City Hall. If it has mechitzos, halachic mechitzos that are 10 tefachim tall and it's 4 by 4, it's a bona fide Reshus HaYachid. What happens if there's a mound around an area? In other words, there's an incline. So there is a certain point that if it's very inclined, we view that as a mechitzah. Because since it's going to be difficult to use that mound as ground, it's called loy nicha tashmishta, it becomes into a wall. We're going to learn about those halachas. We're going to have a Mishnah speaking about if a person throws an object and the wind gets involved in taking the object to the entire 4 amas, b'reshus harabim, or the opposite, the wind prevents it from going 4 amas. Is there a place where the wind and myself, so to say, will achieve the proper hoitzah? Will I be chayiv? Will I not be chayiv? We're going to go over to the status of a carmelis. We're going to say that the sea has a status of a carmelis, even though you can argue why would that be? Again, if the water, if the basin for the water is 10 tefachim deep and it's 4 by 4, why would it not be at a Reshus HaYachid? We'll speak out why not. But the fact is that a sea for any body of water is a carmelis, and the question will be if a person is on a boat and they are, for example, traveling on sweet water, they're in the Tefilla, and you want to take water from the waters into your boat. The boat is at a Reshus HaYachid. From a carmelis to a Reshus HaYachid, he said that Rabbanan, what would be the way that would permit you to do that? Or in reverse, if there's wastewater on a ship and you want to throw it out, you can't throw directly from a carmelis, from a Reshus HaYachid into a carmelis with the Rabbanan. What will be the solution for that? And a lot more. Let us start. We left off on the Kuf Amud Aleph, 8 lines from the top of the Amud towards the beginning of the line. Amar Rabbi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. All right. Freilach. Amar Rabbi. Boy v'reshus harab. And it's amuk asara u'rechava shmoina. So it's double the width that is needed to create a Reshus HaYachid. And v'zarek l'toichem machtzeles, you throw inside the spit a mat of woven reeds. Chayiv. Why are you chayiv? Because you threw it from a Reshus harabim and it landed in a bona fide Reshus HaYachid. There's no chiddush. We're building up. However, what happens if you take this mat, imagine it, and when you throw the mat doesn't land flat, the mat lands standing up. Not only does the mat land standing up, but it lands mamash in the middle. Now the boyer is 8 by 8 exactly. I know that a mat is very skinny, but it takes up space. So now that it landed standing up, neither side has a full 4 by 4. Right, boim ka'achas. If you say it landed first, when it landed, it was a Reshus HaYachid. Now it separated it. Now there's not a Reshus HaYachid, Nishtahed, Nishtahin. If you say Boin Ka'achas, here, that will cause a kula, because that means that, there's no Reshus HaYachid. The mat is standing. There isn't any side that has the 4x4. Okay. So Chilka b'machzeles. So the boya that Rabbi Yochanan had that we learned about yesterday, he didn't know. Abaya knows. Abaya says patan. Abaya says we say boyin ka'achas. Now let's add another detail. Just come back to what we learned yesterday, right towards the end of pay of Tzaddik Tesamut Beis, when we quoted the Mishnah of throwing something sticky against the wall. We wanted to know whether it becomes part of the wall, because the case of Rabbi Yochanan was throwing earth in a pit. Does it become part of the ground? So the Gemara used the words mevatel. If you're mevatel, it means if you plan to leave it there, then it becomes part of the pit. Now over here, leaving a mat standing in mitten of saboir, lav dafka, you're going to be mevatel it as much as you would be mevatel earth in the bottom of the pit. So says the Gemara, la abaya, the pshitale, even in the case of machzelas, that he says that not only boim ka'achas, but boim ka'achas has to do also with the fact that you're mevatel mechitza. That means you plan to leave it there. Because if you wouldn't plan to leave it there, then you can't say it becomes part of the walls of the pit. Why is it the walls of the pit? So if by the mat you say that unless we know otherwise, it becomes part of the pit, that in the case of Rabbi Yochanan, by the chulya, by the chunk of earth, the mevatel mechitza. However, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who asked the boya, by chulya, he didn't even know. Shita over here by machzeles, the way mevatel mechitza. Because how would you know unless the guy who threw there said otherwise? Right? We would not assume that you're going to end up leaving it over there. And that's just pointing out the chiddush of Abaya. It's not only does he not have a boya, he says boim kiachas, but he's very liberal in the application of you being mevatel it in the boy, which is taka why it becomes part of the boy, and now you lost the status of Reshus. And again, amuka asara urchava arba, right? The minimum size of Reshus Hayah, and it is malayamayim. It's filled with water. Now, the last sugi we learned yesterday, which was important, turning to the top of Kuf, is that akira means taking something from a stationary position. Hanacha means placing it into a stationary position. So we mentioned that if something goes on top of water, water on water it becomes all one water, and the bottom of the water is laying on the bottom of the holder of the basin. But like the nut, if it floats, it's not called hanacha. Here, if you threw something in the water, and the Rishonim say you threw a rock in, the rock landed to the bottom. So it landed, it had an hanacha. So it says the Abaya that you're chayev. Now, what's the chiddush over here? The chiddush over here is that even though the pit is filled with water, so one might have thought that the pit doesn't have a depth of 10 because it's filled. No, water doesn't fill it up. So it has to land on the floor, but when it lands on the floor, we say that it landed in a Reshus Hayah. However, let's make a contrast. Malaya Pedas, you have a pit filled with produce, with grain, it's more substantial. And you throw something in it, you're potter. Why are you potter? Because it didn't land in a Reshus Hayah. Now, if you threw it from 4 amos away, then you carried 4 amos with Reshus Hayah. But if you were right there, even though the grain is in a pit, so what? Now that the grain is in the pit loses the status of Reshus Hayah. My tama mayim lemevatla mechitza. However, Peris miyamevatla mechitza. That's the word. Now, Tosfos has to point out, just to make it a hemshech, if we know that you do not plan to leave the Peris there, coming back, then it will not be mevatla mechitza. But we assume he's saying that produce belongs in a pit. How people used to store produce, putting it in the ground. That's why it's considered bottle in there, because you do plan to leave it there for a long time, and that takes away the mechitz. Tanya namihachi, the fetish. Now the Tanya namihachi is not going to get a pedish, but the chiddush that mayim is not mavatzel the mechitza. That azoyrek min hayam le'isratia. If you threw something, you're in the sea, and you throw directly on a highway, because it was common that people had highways that go on the side of the sea. We're looking for a Reshus Harabim, so it's a highway. or so you're going to be pater. Just to know, pater means not mutter. Pater because the yam, as we learn more in Amud Beis, has the status of a caramelist. Is the fish no? Okay, I'll get to the Rosh Hashanah in a moment. Shlomo is asking it whether the beach is at Rosh Hashanah. Here, there's a highway on the side of the waters. That in yesh b'makim shezarek amoik asara v'rachav arba'ah. But if you have, this is a huge chiddush, in the sea, a body of water has the status of a caramelist. We'll speak that out in a moment why. But if in the bed of the water, sometimes there is a hole in the ground, in the seabed. It's an unusual hole. And that hole in the water, you're already going down a little bit, goes down 10, and it's wide 4 by 4. So that Shimon holds that area has a din of Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, if you threw from there, you're going to be chayav because the Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. So what do we see over here? The last words of Nashi before the Mishnah that we learned from Rav Shimon that the mayim lemavat lemechitz. Now, Bekitzer, I want to say the following: just negay the sea, and it's negay for Amud Beis as well. It's also a lot negay and negay Eruvim. Just to know how things work. As we will learn in Masechtas Eruvim, and how this is a halacha l'maisa today in most large cities where you live, that there is a city Eruv. The challenge in a city Eruv is that we follow the Prima Gadim, and according to some poskim, no one can debate with that, even though there was a discussion between the Chazon Ish and the Prima Gadim, that we cannot put a Tzuras HaPesach Mechitza around a Reshus Harabim. It will not work. If you have a biblical Reshus Harabim, the way we're learning, how do you make a Reshus Hayach? It doesn't have to be private property. It has to have mechitzas of 10 and 4 by 4. How do you define a mechitza? There's different types of mechitzas. So there is a concept of you simply making a tzuras hapesach, which is a beam on one side, beam on the other side, and a beam on the top. And even if there are no hinges, we'll learn about an Eruvin, it's called a proper mechitza. So we follow the concept that if you have a biblical Reshus Harabim, this type of mechitza is not a mechitza. Since it doesn't inhibit people going back and forth, doesn't stop the flow of traffic, it's not called a mechitza. And being that all of the big cities, when we make a city Eruv, we are using a lot of this Tzuras HaPesach type of mechitza. If not, the city, the Goyim would not allow you if you're going to put a proper wall. So how can you make an Eruv in a large city when we go by the fact that if that mechitza doesn't stop the flow of traffic, it's not called a mechitza, which is why every large city that makes a mechitza, before they put the mechitza up, the first step in making a city Eruv is by determining that this place is not a Reshus Harabim, it's only a carmelis. For a carmelis, a Tzuras HaPesach is good enough of a mechitza. It will make the carmelis into a Reshus Hayach. Now that's a challenge because now you're living you're living in Los Angeles, you're living in New York, you're living in Sao Paulo, in large cities. How are you going to make that a non-Reshus Harabim? So one of the solutions will be, let's go back to any city. Let's go to Manhattan or Brooklyn and Queens that's surrounded with a body of water, surrounded by a body of water. As we learn later on this Amud, that if the decline is that within 4 amas it goes down 10 tefachim, that's the key. That's the question. Within 4 amas it goes down a height or goes up height of 10 tefachim. That is viewed as a wall. So, and that's a proper wall. And again, it can be a public area. You can have millions of people. But it doesn't matter. If there's a real mechitza, not a tzuras hapesach, then it's certainly not a biblical Reshus Harabim. It's going to be a carmelis because any area that's surrounded, it's called a karpef. If it's not hukaf ledira and it's very large and has a bit of a carmelis, that's fine. What am I saying all over here? That a body of water, theoretically, if it has an incline, should be a Reshus Hayach. So how does it become? Why does it just? And now we're using it for mechitzas because there is walls, and we're learning in our Gemara right now that the water, we don't view it now that it's flat. It's not flat. The water is not bottled. It's not bottled the mechitzas. So the reason why a body of water, even if it's in a basin that has walls, because there is a decline, and there's 4 by 4. You're kidding? It's the Hudson River, whatever the rivers around Manhattan, or a sea. Since it's difficult for people to use the top of the water. You can't stand on water. You're going to float down. That in itself takes it away from it being a reshus hayach. It's like a mechitzas. It takes away the biblical reshus harabim. I don't think a karmelis is only a drabanan, but it becomes a karmelis. And indeed, any body of water has the status of a karmelis. And the chiddush of Rab Shimon here is that if in the water itself, there is a blue hole, it's called, sometimes in these beautiful places, because when you look from the top, there's such a protrusion downwards that it's a gavaldik. He says that area does assume a status of a reshus hayach, which is a big chiddush, and we're just proving from Rav Shimon that water is not mavatzel mechitzas. Just quickly going back to the Eruvin, the challenge by Eruvin, when you're using the seabed walls to make it into a mechitza, some suggested that during the winter, if you live in the Europe, where some of these rivers freeze over, when it's ice, it is mavatzel mechitza. And there's a whole back and forth, and these are old shilas regarding Eruvin. And that svara is at least rejected by many, since ice naturally becomes water again, and when there is water, the water doesn't clog up the walls. Okay, Chevra, it's late. Let's go, move on. We quoted this Mishnah yesterday. We're speaking about a person who's standing even only exactly 4 amos away. So he's 4 amos away of a wall. He's in the reshus harabim, and the item that he throws hits l'mayla masara tvachim. And the Havamina and the Gemara in the Havamina was that it hits it and it bounces back, which will be a problem because if it bounces back, then it makes the Hanacha within the Aladams. But that's not the case. It's stuck on the wall, but it's stuck L'mayla Masara. L'mayla Masara by Reshus Hayachid. Reshus Hayachid is Oila Ad L'Rakia. Or Reshus Harabim, as we continuously learn, only is it a Reshus Harabim up to 10 Tvachim. So if it's stuck above 10 Tvachim, Kizodik Ba'avir, and it's mamish, nothing happened. It's a Reshus Harabim to a makim ptur. Lamata masara kizoyrik ba'aretz. And the din is that azoyrik ba'aretz arba amas yechayiv. That's a kisud daraisa, as we learned Gemara Gemida law. It's halacha l'meishem b'sinei that that's a tulda of chaytzah. Now the Gemara is referring back to the Reisha. The Reisha says when you throw arba amas b'koisel, you're kizoyrik ba'avet, and it's okay. But again, the havamina is that it ricocheted back. It didn't rest 4 amas away, and the Mishnah concludes that it has to be 4 amas for you to be chayiv. No, the Mishnah is it's a sticky fig cake, it's stuck on the wall, and that's the case of the Mishnah. So there is a hanacha. We never view the vertical wall as a reshus hayachid, even if it's thick, because again, it's standing, right? You only look at a horizontal platform as a reshus hayachid. So the question is, it's over the ear space. If it's over 10 tefachim, it's makim ptur. If it's under 10 tefachim, and it's over, it's adjacent to the reshus harabim, it has a din of a reshus harabim. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Amar Rav Chia. Zajac l'mayla masaram. If you threw above 10, v'holcha v'nacha b'chur kol shehu, and it rested in a crevice in the wall, and the crevice doesn't have 4x4. Now, my friend, it's 10 tefachim off the ground. It's okay. It's 10 tefachim off the ground. It's 10 tefachim off the ground. And therefore, what? If the crevice would have 4x4, it would be a reshus hayachid. And therefore, you would be chayiv because you're throwing it from the reshus harabim to reshus hayachid. Why would so? But it doesn't have 4x4. It's not a reshus hayachid. Nevertheless, the chiddush is that this is connected to the machlokes of Rav Meir and the Rabbanan that we have in Masechtas Eruvin regarding mezuzah. That Rav Meir, as we spoke in our intro, that subscribes to choykikim lahashlim. So if you have a doorway, the chiyuv of a mezuzah is on a doorway. You can have a home and it won't be chayiv a mezuzah if there's no halachic doorway. So there's 10 tefachim height. There's 4 tefachim at least for the first 3 tefachim up. There has to be a minimum amount of 4 tefachim width. But as you go higher, it starts to come in, right? It's an arch. But if the wall, if you were to chisel out the stone, there would be enough wall for you to have a doorway through it. Rav Meir says you have to put up a mezuzah. So here also, this crevice, if you would be able to chisel out in the wall and make a 4x4 tefachim, imagine, we view this crevice now as a reshus hayachid, gavaldik. And according to the Chachamim, that they say, ein chaykim lahashlim, it doesn't become a reshus hayachid, and therefore, lo yimachayv. Tayanami hachi, Zajac l'mayla masara, v'holcha v'nacha b'chur kol shehu. Clearly in a brayse, Rav Meir says, yechayiv, because it's considered a halachic reshus hayachid, and the Chachamim are poitim. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Teil hamislake tasoro. The law of a mound. This is so important. All right, the mount is going up. If it accumulates, hamislak, it means you gather. If it accumulates 10 tfachim height, and how long does it take for you to go up or down 10 tfachim? Within 4 amas. If it's incline, shkoyach, if you walk for 2 blocks and you find yourself at a higher or a lower level, that's not a wall. That's an inclined or a declined ground. But if the mound is so steep that within 4 amas you go up 10 tfachim, that's halachically considered a wall. Again, this concept, since lo nicha tashmishta, on such an inclined or declined earth. And therefore, whatever is on top, if it's 4 by 4, is a reshus hayachid. The Zajac Tanach al gabav yechayev. Tanya nami hachi mavui sheshava lo toichai. Right? If the level of the mavui is the same, but the mavui is on the same level, but then asa midrain lo reshus harabim, but it slopes towards the reshus harabim. In other words, the reshus harabim and the mavui are not on the same level, and there is a mound, right, a hill up or a hill down going which either direction. And the mavui, we're speaking about a location that's closed with mechitzas from 3 sides, and an area that's closed from mechitzas from 3 sides. Mida ayraisa is a reshus hayachid. Midrabanan, they were afraid since one side is open towards the reshus harabim, people might carry to it towards there. So therefore, they said again, Hilchos Eiduvim, on a city Eiduv, that you need to do a very limited mechitza at the side that is open from the mavui towards the reshus harabim to remind you as a heket, this is where it ends and that's where the street begins. And for that, you need to have either a lechi, which is a side post, or you have to have a crossbeam going on top. And that is enough of a 4th wall. So says the Braisa that the incline itself is the wall. It doesn't even need the lechi or the kaira, farvas, because that hill, that mound, as long as it gathers, it goes up or down 10 tfachim within 4 amas, it's considered aband. So therefore, it's walled off from all 4 sides. Now, the Tanakama did not say how inclined does it have to be. Rab Chanina, the Tana, is not arguing; he's just clarifying. Kitaka brings a halacha from carrying the reshus harabim to the reshus hayachid, but he's bringing it in the braisa of a lechi or a kaida just to clarify that what type of incline hill do you need to have that's separating the mavi and the reshus harabim. It has to be amislakit asara mitoich arbo. Beautiful. Mishnah. Zajac says the Mishnah lotoich daladams. The koyach that I had was that this item is only going to go for 2 ams. Guys, I'm standing in the reshus harabim. However, there was windy, and the wind grabbed hold of this item. Vinis galgil, swirling it in the wind, and where did it land? Chutz l'daladams. Says the Mishnah Potter. Guys, we're going to learn a huge chiddush in the Gemara. Not so simple. Now, without going further, you can say, okay, I understand, because my koyach didn't take it 4 amos. The problem is that I made an akira, I propelled it, it had a hanacha a couple of amos later. We'll see in the Gemara, not so simple. Now, the seifa is the opposite. Chutz l'daladam is the koyach that I put into this object was it's going to fly for 4 amos. But here it went against the wind. And then galgal toich daladam is chayev. And when you learn the Sefer, you already see that you need to have it's like a Rashi and Chumash. You need to have a Gemara on the Mishnah. Who cares how much koyach I put into it? If I threw it and it did not go 4 amos, chayev. Take a Gemara on the Sefer v'holei noch. So therefore, Rabbi Yechanan clarifies, and his clarification also goes on the Reisha. Says Rabbi Yechanan, focusing now on the Seifa, what happened was, I threw it 4 amos. It went 4 amos. But it has to normally land. It landed on a garnished. It landed on something that normally would not be considered something substantial. Rashi says even more, if the wind was not swirling it, but the wind was in that moment, it kept it stationary within 3 tefachim off the ground. Stationary, not drain. Beyond 4 amas. And then the wind brought it back. Here is where we say that I'm going to be chayiv. Regularly, Galga means it's rolling, but here it means it's rolling in the wind. And now the same thing is in the Reisha. That the chiddush of the Reisha is that if I threw it, so say all of the Rishonim here, and I only put enough koich for 2 amas, but the wind carried it for 4 amas, I will be chayiv chatas. Wow. What happened in the Reisha is that I threw it, and by 2 amas, it landed for a moment on Gabamashu. Then the wind carried it further. My action ended when there was a hanacha. A hanacha al Gabamashu is called a hanacha. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah here. Tanya nami hachi, Zajac chutz l'dalet, v'doch hafatu haruach, v'chnisatu, and it brought it in to within 4. Even though it at the end, after it rested for a moment, it went further out. That's when I'm potter. But says the Braisa, ruach mashu. But if I threw it and it was chap by the wind, but it landed for a moment chutz l'dalet, even though it's swirling, in other words, it's not stationary properly, but it did land mashu chutz l'dalet, and the wind brought it back in. Here, that's the part of the Seifa. That's why I will be chayiv. Okay. Now says Amar Rava, Toich Gimel Rabbanan. If you remember the beginning of this Perek, right? Taf Tzadik Vav. Whether we say Kluta Kamishuhuncha, and the Chachamim do not subscribe to Kluta Kamishuhuncha. We actually had a Braisa on Daf Tzadik Zayin, if you remember, that say that even the Chachamim that do not subscribe to Kluta Kamishuhuncha, but if it's Toich Gimel Tvachim, Lavud, then they say it's considered Anach. Rava disagrees with that. Now, how can Rava disagree with the Braisa? That's a big question. Rava is saying that according to the Chachamim that don't go by the concept of Kluta Kamishuhuncha, Sarich Hanacha al Gabe Mashu, even if something comes within 3 Tvachim from the ground, and it's twirling, it's not called it resting. Or it's moving, it's flying over, it's not like I spoke out if the wind is mamish holding it in a spot. That's an exception. But if it's twirling or moving, even Toich Gimel, it did not yet rest. And Rashi writes 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid, a big statement, a big nafkamina, lamai nafkamina in a normal case. So Rashi reminds us that if a person does an act of Hitzah, for them to be chayiv chatas, it has to be b'shoigig mitchila seva at soifa. Being that the definition of Hitzah is akira hanocha. So if I, God forbid, I threw something b'rishus harabah, when I made the akira, I forgot that I can't carry it. Before it landed, I said, "Oh, it's Shabbos. I won't be chayiv chatas," because by the hanacha, I'm aware that I'm doing something wrong. What happens if it's already within 3 tefachim? It's less than 3 tefachim off the ground, and I say, "Oh, I can't do that." So Rav is saying that I won't be chayiv chatas. If you're going to say kluta kamishuhuncha, at least when it's in the lavud area, so it's already landed. The fact that I realized before it physically touched the ground, it doesn't matter. The hanocha happened b'shoigig. Since Rav is saying that Rabbanan, you need hanocha, it has to be al gaba mashu, but before it physically touched the ground, even if you just touched it by a drop, without any physical contact, there's no hanacha. So if I remembered that it's Shabbos before that happened, I would be potter. Now, Yosef and Emel become a law shmaitz. This din of Rava that the Chachamim that argue with Rabbi Kiva on the Mishnah, the Chachamim that do not subscribe to Kluta, even Toich Gimel, you also don't say Kluta. Why did I need to have you to say that? Listen. Isn't this our Mishnah? When our Mishnah said it in, and the Sefer didn't make sense. Why would you be chayiv? And on that, Rabbi Yechon says, "Hu shenach al gaba mashu." Hu shenach al gaba mashu. The fact that Rabbi Yechon needed to emphasize that the chiddush of the Mishnah is that you threw it. It touched the ground and it came back. It touched the ground. Why didn't Rabbi say it came within 3 tefachim of the ground? The fact that he did not say that is an ayah that even if it would have come within 3 tefachim of the ground, it's not called nach at all. So that's already clear. Amalei, to which he responded, no. Rabbi Yechanan's statement in the Mishnah has nothing to do with Rabbi. Rabbi Yechanan was speaking about an item that's misgalgel. Misgalgel means it's either twirling, or at least it's moving. It's moving, not down, not gravity. Here is taka. We don't say kaluta. Misgalgel kamrat. Misgalgel and shefel anua. The fact that it's moving, it's not going to rest in this space. Of course, you don't say ki'ilu nach. But without Rava, I would have thought aval hay. When I throw something, there's no wind. It's about to land because that's the trajectory. That's where gravity is taking it. Here you would have thought, even the Sefer Linuach, you know exactly where it's going to rest, and it's already within the 3 tefachim. Lavud, Aflag Abdullah Nach, maybe the Chachamim will be right that in this case, yes, command the Nach done. And again, therefore, like Rashi gives the Nafkamina, and therefore, if it's command the Nach, then if the person, when it entered within 3, they didn't know yet at Shabbos, and then they chapped at Shabbos, they will be chayv chappos because it had the hamach already b'shoigig. Kamash Malon Rabba, that l'chachamim, we don't even say klut in this case. It's only resting when it hits the ground. If you remembered before it hit the ground, indeed you will be exempt from a chatos because you didn't have shoigig from the beginning until the end. Okay, next mission. Hazoyrek bayam, as we mentioned, a yam, whether it's the big sea, whether it is any body of water, a sea, even though, speaking about a sea that goes down, it goes down for 10 tefachim. That's important. It's a sea that has 4 by 4. Theoretically, you would argue, well, water is not mabatzal the mechitzas. We just had that in Amud Aleph. So the Mela, it's a reshus hayachid. It's not a reshus hayachid because it's difficult. It's for tashmisha. So it's not a reshus hayachid. Chachamim said it as a din of economics. So Azoyrek Bayam, based on that fact, and you threw something in the sea, even though it went for Amis, but if it would have a din of a reshus harabim, then you would be chayiv. Since it is din of a carmelist, you are potted. We're not saying mutir, because midrabanan, a carmelist is like a reshus harabim. Weiter. Im hayedukok mayim reshus harabim malachis boy. What happens if you have a shallow pool of water that's going out of the body of water? And again, it was common for people to have highways on the sides of a body of water. They would travel there. So we're speaking about a highway. Just to know a highway, going back to Hilchas Eruvin, according to many poskim, this whole concept, do you need to have Kayotze Mitzrayim or not? Many poskim say that a highway is a reshus harabim, period. That's not a reshus harabim. Everyone is traveling on it. You have a highway on the sides of the water. A little bit of the water goes into the highway. So it says the Mishnah that Hazoyrek Utoichi Daladam is chayiv. The cock becomes part of the reshus harabim. It's going on the street. Everyone is going through it. The kamohu the cock mayim less than 10 tefachim. The moment this little protrusion of water, the shallow pool, is 10 tefachim deep, even if people go through it, it's not a reshus harabim. It has a band. So Moinicha Tashmishta makes it from a reshus hayachid into a carmelist, correct? But it's never a reshus harabim. If it's less than 10 tefachim, that's where we say, since people are going through it, it's as a din of a reshus harabim. From another part of the sea, from one part of the yam, from carmelist to carmelist. Now, the Mishnah repeats itself. The kok mayim, reshus harabim mahalechas boy. Since people walk through it, it loses the status of a carmelist. It becomes part of the reshus harabim, and therefore, if it travels for a full 4 amos, you're going to be chayv. Mamish, the Mishnah repeated this din twice, and the question is why. So, the fact that the Mishnah repeated this din twice of a reshus harabim passing through the rekok, you know why it's needed to tell you hakamash malon. The first time the Mishnah mentions this din is to tell you hiloch aladei hadchak shmei hiloch. Right, that's very important. It's inconvenient to walk through it. Since people walk through it, it's a reshus harabim. And the reason why the Mishnah repeats this din a second time is to teach you a law from inference that chashmish aladei hadchak Rashi gives a great example. If you have a Reshus Harabim, okay, and you have the wall, and 9 tfachim above the ground, there's a protrusion. We learned that protrusion is part of the Reshus Harabim, even though normally something that's above 3 tfachim, that's not 4x4, is a makim ptur. Since everyone uses that type of protrusion, if they have a backpack and they want to adjust it, they lean on it, they help it straighten it out. That's called you're being the rabbin is being mishtamish with something that's available to them and has a din of the Reshus Harabim. What will happen if you have a boy? The boy is not 10 tfachim deep; it's 4x4. If it would be 10 tfachim deep, it's a Reshus Hayachid. If it's 9 tfachim deep, what status does it have? So the din is if it's 9 tfachim deep and if it's not 4x4, it's a maktur, right? But people are using it. But then it's not comfortable to use a pit that doesn't have 10 tfachim, because if you want to put something in there, you are afraid, you don't want it to protrude upwards. That's called a bird with a Reshus Harabim. You don't want people to trip on it. So 9 tfachim is called tashmish ala de'atcha. People use it, but they're not that comfortable using it. Do we say that since people use it, it has the status of a Reshus Harabim? And the answer is no. Only hiluch ala de'atcha. Like this rekak has the status of a Reshus Harabim. But that pit, since even though people use it, but it's inconvenient for people to use it, it doesn't have a din of a Reshus Harabim. And that's why the Mishnah repeated the din twice. Want to tell you the din directly and want to make the inference that tashmish ala de'atcha is not called Reshus Harabim. Problem is, the Mishnah did not need to give the same example. The Mishnah did not need to give the same exact example of you have a shallow pool of water that's protruding outwards. The cock today is in a only. Don't say another din of hiluch ala de'atcha. Why the same case? My answer is to tell you that this din of if you have a shallow pool of water, it was obviously common then. If you had highways on the sides of waters, and you had the water sometimes going out, if people walk through it and it doesn't go 10 tfachim deep, it's part of the Reshus Harabim. It's a chiddush. You have to know that both the Yemais Chama, it has a din of the Reshus Harabim, and the Yemais Kshamim, even during winter, it has a din of the Reshus Harabim. And since people are hot and they want to cool off, so many people walk through water just to cool off. So it was more commonly used. People are going to walk through it. Since people are cold and more people avoid the water, maybe it doesn't have a status of a Reshus Harabim. We're not saying it can have the status of a carmelist, but it's not going to have a din of a Reshus Harabim. I would say maybe the opposite. Are people concerned of getting their shoes, their pants, their jalaba dirty? If it's dirty anyway, they might say things were dirtier, things were muddier. Even the metanfi, anyways, everything is soiled. To walk through it. But maybe when someone is clean, they will hesitate to walk through it. And again, the part will be that if people don't really walk through it, it's called hiluch ala de'atcha. It shouldn't have a din of Reshus Harabim. So in both cases, it does have a din of Reshus Harabim. Abaya Amar, Rabbi is not arguing, is giving another way of approaching it. That the reason why the Mishnah has to mention the same case twice, it's right. If the pool, speaking now about the width, if it's not for amas, if it's very wide, right, then akufi makvile, then people might walk around it. No, it's when you walk through a body of water, like how much water is there? If a little bit you walk through it, if it's already very wide, more people walk around it. The more people walk around it, the less of a status of a Reshus Harabim it should have. So Kamash Malan, even if it's for amas wide, it still has a din of a Reshus Harabim. And the third approach, Rav Ashi Yamar, it's right. Here we're speaking about 4 tfachim. 4 tfachim means that it was what the depth now. So how deep is it? So will people try to jump over it? Or no, fakert, how narrow is it? How narrow is it? If it has 4 tfachim or more, people have to walk through it. But you would think, it's not even 4 tfachim. It's not even 4 tfachim. Even if you're hot, you're not going to cool yourself off in this water. And if it's such a narrow strip of water, people will jump over it. Most people take a wood. Mifsi'e, pasile. Yet is the Mishnah Machadish, since some people do not jump over it, it still has a din of Reshus Harabim. And v'azar Ravashi l'tamei, domer Ravashi, hay man dezorik v'noch aguda degamu. If you have a bridge, we're speaking about a bridge that is at a Reshus HaRabim, not today's bridges. And those bridges, they were made out of planks of wood, and you're going over something. What happens if one plank is loose? Some people are afraid. So many people would jump over that plank. So says Ravashi, even though most people will jump over that plank, since people also step on it, that plank, that little piece of the bridge, still continues to have the din of a Reshus HaRabim. And therefore, if you throw and it lands over there, you're mechayiv. Sharei rabim boikin boy. Boikin means people pass through it. Enough people pass through it and not jump over it for us to consider that part of the Reshus HaRabim, mamish like the case here of the. Okay, final Mishnah that we will learn today. It says the Mishnah Zajac min hayam le'yabash. If you throw anything from the yam, again, the yam, any body of water has a din of a karmelis. Biblically, if the incline to the basin goes down 10 tfachim within 4 amas, so it's 10, mechitz of 10, 4 by 4, Reshus HaYachid. The Drabanan, the yam has a din of a karmelis because it's difficult to use that space because there's water over it. So if you throw from the yam to the yabasha or from the yabasha to the yam, a boat is a bona fide Reshus HaYachid because it's 4 by 4. We're speaking about if it's 4 by 4 tefachim, and the walls of the ship are 10 tefachim. So the Reshus HaYachid to a karmelis, right? Or even from one boat to the other. Now one boat to the other, we'll get to that in a moment. Does it belong to one person? Does it belong to 2 people and you made an Eruv Chatzeres? We'll get to that in a moment. Point of the Mishnah is that the yam is a karmelis. So the Reshus HaRabim to a karmelis, or vice versa. A boat, the Reshus HaYachid to a karmelis, in all these cases, it's atzam midrabanan. Now, from one boat to the other, you are also pater because midraisa, the Reshus HaYachid to the Reshus HaYachid. However, sfinois, keshurois, if the 2 ships are bound to each other, which means there is no gap in between them, and they're tied, so they're not going to drift off, then you could be metaltal one to the other. And let's add, if they belong to 2 different people, then you need an Eruv Chatzeres. Like we keep on mentioning that Shlomo HaMelech was Misakin, that even from one Reshus HaYachid to the other, if they don't belong to the same ownership, even if I own that with you in partnership, but I own this boat by myself, I need an Eruv Chatzeres, but an Eruv Chatzeres will be effective. Chiddush of the Mishnah is that if an Eruv Kshurais, if they're not bound to the other, Afal Pisha Mukafis, Mukaflis by Trumas, you have to give it in a Mukaf. Mukaf means they're close. If they're not bound, even if you made an Eruv Chatzeres, even if they belong to the same person, you can't be metalful one to the other because it's very possible it's on water, it's moving. I'm going to pass something, it's going to fall into the yam. Carrying from a ship into the yam is a isur midrabanan. So you don't say it's a gzeira l'gzeira. No, the Chachamim didn't want you to carry from one ship to the other if they're not bound one to the other. All right. So now that we established that a boat is a Reshus HaYachid, now that we established that the body of water is a karmelis, what's going to happen? 2-way street. Either if you're going on a sweet body of water, you're going in the kinetic, and you want to have drinking water. How Shabbos? How will you be allowed to bring the water into the ship? Karmelis to the Reshus HaYachid. How, if you have wastewater on the boat, how would you throw it overboard when you're going from a Reshus HaYachid to a karmelis l'choura? All of this will take you into an isur derabanan. So begins the Gemara. Itmar was taken. You have a svina. Rafuna says that all you need to do to be allowed to bring water from the kinetic into the ship, really, he holds it's b'chlal not an isur. It's a karmelis. The Gemara is going to address that. You have to make up seheket. You should remember. You should remember that sometimes there is a problem. All you need to do is have a little rod that protrudes over the water. It's lehekeda, like a lechi, and then you can bring in water. Umamale. However, Rav Chizda and Rabbi Barafuna say no. They both say oisa makim arba'a umamale. Guys, whoever learned Eruvin last cycle around, that was the closest that we got to it. Listen to this. You make a box. The box has to have 4 walls. According to Rashi, the height of the wall doesn't even have to be 10 tefachim. So the box is open from the top and the bottom, but you have 4 by 4, and you put it over the wall of the ship, on top of the water, doesn't have to touch the waters. So we say, here we say, good achis. We make believe as if the walls go down and touch the waters. So therefore, the water is inside that mechitza, is keilu in a reshus hayachid. You are carrying from a reshus hayachid to a reshus hayachid, even though you can't say it really belongs to the same ownership, because that's like, for everyone, the boat is only yours. Here they allowed you to do it. But you have to make this mechitza that's called mokoim arba. It has to be 4x4 numbers. You got it, guys? Between either walls, think about a cardboard box, but you take out the bottom. So it's through. But you have walls on each side. Now, some Rishonim will learn this more in Erev and hold, know that this box has to have 10 tefachim. Since it has 10 tefachim, so then it's l'chora, like a reshus hayachid in there. Only then do you say, good achis, the walls go down. But let's leave it the way we're learning over here, that you don't even need the 10 tefachim height.
Rabbi,
now, yes.
Is the box actually in the water, or it's just on top of the water?
The top of the water. But remember, we're going to learn a lot more about these concepts. But let's leave it right now. So now, says the Gemara, Rafuna is the maker, right? Rafuna says that, you have to have some sort of heked, umamali. But hold on, how can he say that? My friends, Yam is a carmelist. You cannot carry from a carmelist into Reshus HaYachid, into the boat. So he says, moiridik. He says, carmelist, ma'ara mashchinan. When you measure, where exactly is the carmelist? You know where the carmelist is? Not the top of the water. The seabed. The seabed is a carmelist. And really, like we mentioned, the seabed is 10 tefachim deep. Go use the seabed. It's hard, has an end of a carmelist. Now, here's the part. That when the Chachamim added the Reshus of a carmelist, they compared it in some aspects to a Reshus Rabbim, L'kula. Just like a Reshus Rabbim only goes to 10 tefachim, a carmelist only goes up until 10 tefachim. So if the seabed is a carmelist, and you're going up 10 tefachim and beyond 10 tefachim, it's no longer a carmelist. What is it called? It's called a makom ptur. So you're taking from a makom ptur into a reshus hayachid. There's no problem with that. Va'avina makom pturu. And hold on, if that's the case, why do you even need a ziz? Beautiful. And really, the last narrow line, ubedin hu the ziz nami loy leboyi. Ella ki echad lehaveleyakeda. Everyone knows a sea is a carmelist. No one knows that London knows really the carmelist is the seabed. So you make a heket, it's good enough. However, right, the first white line of Chiz and Rabba Barafuna Amri, they both hold no. That the reason why you have to make Oisamakim Arbom Malay, because they hold carmelist, a sea, body of water, whether it's the ocean, whether it's a lake, it has a din of a carmelist, but from the top of the water. Carmelist misfas maya mashkin, and measure the top, not the bottom. Why? And why is that? Hold on. Everyone agrees that a carmelist only goes up 10 tefachim because because the entire body of water is viewed like thick earth. Going back to Amud Aleph. Not here. We don't say the svara we learned in the beginning of today's daf. Here we say that the water is like an extension of the earth. It's like when we learned when the paytas fill up the void, there's no more. So it's one chunk of sea, and all of it is a carmelist. Now, if you go 10 tefachim above the water, that's already a makom ptur, but the waters are a carmelist, and therefore, which still we're relying on the heter of the achis. We make believe as if the walls go down to the ground with all these heterim. Then come a talmud carmelist to the shus hayachid. Let's skip a few more lines. According to the that he's the lenient of the Amar. But that is all based on the fact that the carmelist is only the seabed. Hold on. Who told you that you have 10 tefachim of water until the seabed? Maybe the ship will be going in very shallow waters, and maybe the top of the water is within 10 tefachim. So Amalei, Afuna responds that Gomedinan, I know how ships work. Even the little shipalach of those days. If there's less than 10 tefachim of depth, a boat cannot travel there. Moisha is part of the bow. The part of the bow in front of the ship that is above the water. That's the front. Maybe the ship is going into shallows, and maybe the ship itself won't go that close because it doesn't want to hit the ground. But the top of the ship, where the Mordechay is, it's less than 10 tfachim, and maybe you're going to draw water from there, and then the ziz doesn't resolve. You're violating Yisur Darabanan. So answers the Gemara. Amar Rav Safra, no, that even these ships, goishashe means probers. Goishashe means they were sailors. There were people that were making sure that even the furthermost front part of the ship, the bow doesn't go in a place where it's so shallow. According to the other two Amirayim, which is Rav Chisda or Rav Bar Rav Fula, that they say, now I have a problem. Afkan, we're speaking about getting fresh waters in. Now the question is, how do you get rid of the dirty waters? So according to Rav Fula, it's not a problem. Just throw it overboard and decide where there's a ziz. But now that you're saying you have to use that box, so you would say you would pour it through the box. Even if it's not touching the walls of the box, it's disgusting. It's not nice if you have this whole halachic rishus. You want to use it to clean waters. If you're going to use that same place to pour out dirty waters, right? And the tema, the it's disgusting. So Shlem is asking, so make another box. I'm trying to figure out if you don't need to make a special exit box. So he answers, for that, you don't need anything. All you need to do is the shadalei adafna, the sfina, pour the shleifchen on the walls of the ship. 1 second. If you pour it on the walls of the ship, it's going to trickle down into the waters. Now, I get it, guys, that the mechitzas, what's the din of a mechitza? We learned that yesterday. Remember the walls that are around the Rishus HaYachid, if they make the Rishus HaYachid, it's Kal V'chomer, they are Rishus HaYachid. The walls of the ship are the Rishus HaYachid, but it's going to go down into the water. And so, your koyach, it's not direct, but it's through your koyach. So we'll stop over here. So the Gemara says that koychai b'karmel is like gazru. Indirect transfer biblically is prohibited. But if it's to begin with, a karmel is, right, we're not worried. You pour it on the sides of the ship, God willing, to be continued. I think that I'm already over here. We don't have to rush off. We're good, guys?
Rabbi Koyach, you got cut off a little bit when you were talking about Pesach Hashar and Rishus Harabim. If you could just repeat it on a voice note later on, because I wanted to hear that.
You're talking about
Yeah. When you were talking about like what's the Rishus Harabim today, like how do we do mechitzas today? How do we make a eruv today in our Rishus Harabim in the city of Los Angeles, for instance?
You know, I'll leave a voice number. The way we make it a Rishus Harabim nowadays, all of the eruv is first we have to declare that location here LA is a karmas. That's the first thing we have to do. We have to first halachically downgrade it into a karmas. And then making a eruv by using Suras HaPesach will be effective. The question is, how do you make a big city like New York, like Sao Paulo, like LA, how do you make it into a karmas? That's the issue. So I'm saying that if you have a city that is surrounded by waters, then we can use this concept that we learned today, that since there is a decline within 4 amas, 10 tefachim deep, it's called a wall. And if the majority of the city is surrounded by a wall, which is another whole topic, the majority of the city is surrounded by a wall, like here in LA, the majority of the city is surrounded by the walls of the freeway, then it's no longer a biblical Rishus Harabim. Did you hear?
And what about the fact that what about the fact that there's 600,000 people maybe walking around the streets in the city of like Los Angeles or Manhattan?
Svika, if I have a plaza, if I have a indoor location, and in there gathers 10 billion people, and as a din of Rishus HaYachid, was a place that has proper mechitzas of 10 tefachim high, and I don't care how big it is. Midoiraisa, it's a Rishus HaYachid.
Got it.
Midoiraisa. That's amazing. No, the Rishus HaYachid doesn't mean private.
Got it.
Doesn't mean limited. It just means Rishus Harabim is like the midbar. It was open. There were no mechitzas. If you have mechitzas, it becomes Rishus HaYachid. The problem is that the mechitzas are very weak. Have a good.
The only thing tablet that we have that you can see like for Zoom. No, for the Zoom. I have a tablet that doesn't even internet. It has their own SIM card. I can bring it. It's my work tablet, but I can bring it It is bigger than the